So mapping generalized or specialized entities. So when you have issues of specialization and generalization, when you're mapping these things, you have got to look at the kind of constraints that this particular generalization or specialization entities are participating in. So the constraints are basically for mandatory and, mandatory or, optional and optional or. So we have said that where you have a relation, okay, in this case you have a mandatory and. So that mandatory and, you create all the attributes of both the superclass and the subclass, they go in one table. That is for mandatory and. For a mandatory or, you get only the subclasses. You create tables for only the subclasses. That means you don't create any tables for the superclass. For the optional and, okay, you create one table of the superclass and one table that joins all the subclasses, okay? And then for the optional or, you create a table for each, okay? For the optional and, you create one table for the superclass and one table for the subclasses. That is for the optional and. And then for the optional or, a table for each. So let's go and demonstrate this. Assuming this is a mandatory and, that you have to derive tables for, So department, no. Let's, this is an employee with an employee ID. This employee has a name and specialization. So you have an employee, again, I'll use the example that we used the other time, and the day. So something special about the lecturer could be qualification. And then for the dean, we shall assume that they have a dean ID. Now, let's borrow this such that we don't draw again. 2, 3, 4. So if it is a mandatory and, it is one table. So we are going to create a table called employees. Employee. I'm going to put employee here. And then we shall have an employee ID. Then we shall have an employee name, and then specialization. This one's gone. Oh no. And then we shall have qualification, because we are creating one table, and then we shall have dean ID. So this is, if this is a mandatory and, like we see, you just create only one table. Employee ID is the primary key. If it is a mandatory or, if we change this to be a mandatory or, that means we create only tables for the subclasses. So, what you going to do? Interesting. So in this case, we remove the ID, and then here we remove qualification. So this table is going to be called lecturer because it is this. We are recording the subclasses. That it's going to be lecturer, and this is going to be dean. So this is a mandatory OR. You only create tables for the superclass. So you create a table called lecturer, okay, where there is qualification as a unique, distinct role and or attribute, and then you have the dean, where you have the dean ID. So that is what you would do. So if it is an optional and, if you changed this to be an optional and, okay, you would create two tables. The table for the superclass, in this case, it would be employee, and the table that joins the subclasses. In this case, this table, we shall call it dean, lecturer, dean. So this is how this table would be like, okay? You'll have a table called employee, and then you will also have a table. So a table for the superclass, one table for the superclass, and then one table for the subclasses, okay? So this table, this one would be a foreign key that references this one, that references employee ID. Now that is for optional and. If it's an optional or, if we change that to an optional or, you create a table for each. So for the superclass and each of the subclasses. So we take this. And this. This table is going to be called, so this one is called dean. We remove qualification. We bring this here, Ctrl+C. This is the lecturer. So you create, these are going, the resultant tables are going to be 3. This is going to be a foreign key referencing employee ID. This is also going to be foreign key referencing employee ID in the table called relation. So this is how you would deal with an optional or kind of specialization. So to validate this, okay, to ascertain that you have created the number of entities, to ascertain that you have created the correct number of relations in your logical schema. This is how you validate it. You're going to count all the entities, that is the strong entities that you have, the associative entities that you have, and the weak entities that you have originally in your original ER. You count those ones. And then you count the many-to-many relationships that you have in your original ER. And then also you count the multi-valued attributes that you have in your original ER. The sum of these should be equal to the schemas that you have created in your logical design. The sum of this should be equal to the schemas that you have created in your logical design. So that is what I had for you today. Have yourself a good day. Bye.